It was just past midnight when my phone buzzed. I thought it was a wrong number until I saw who it was, my lawyer. His message was short, almost cold. Call me immediately. My chest tightened as I dialed back, my hands trembling in the silence of the night. What he told me about my daughter that night shattered me in ways I never imagined. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This is Revenge Depth, and tonight I'll take you deep into a story of truth, betrayal, and heartbreak. Richard had spent the evening in quiet routine, reviewing the quarterly reports for his company, unaware that his life was about to be turned upside down. The numbers on the spreadsheet blurred as his mind began racing. The lawyer's call wasn't just urgent, it was terrifying. Something about his daughter, something he couldn't yet imagine, was wrong. For years, Richard had been the kind of father who believed that love was shown through action. He had worked tirelessly, ensuring his daughter, Emily, never wanted for anything. Birthday presents meticulously chosen, school events never missed, and even the late-night study sessions when she struggled with homework, all of it was part of a father's quiet devotion. But now, that devotion seemed like it had been built on a fragile foundation. The phone call at midnight made him question everything. What could have happened that required the lawyer's immediate attention? He tried to steady himself, brushing his hands against his trousers as if that could calm the storm of fear building inside him. The lawyer's voice was low and tense when he finally spoke. "Richard, you need to sit down. I just came from Emily's apartment." Richard's stomach turned cold. "Something's happened," the lawyer continued. "Something that could ruin her life if not handled carefully." Richard's mind raced. Was it an accident, a mistake, something criminal? He couldn't process it all at once. His heart pounded, and he gripped the edge of the desk, feeling the weight of impending disaster pressing down on him. He could remember Emily as a child, laughing, playful, full of dreams and innocence. How could something so severe be happening to her now? Every memory clashed with the fear forming in his chest. And yet, he forced himself to listen, every word from the lawyer cutting deeper into his soul. By the time the call ended, Richard was a storm of conflicting emotions: panic, anger, fear, and a desperate, gnawing need to act, to protect his daughter at all costs. This wasn't just a story of legal matters or contracts. This was about trust, betrayal, and the hidden dangers that had been lurking beneath the surface of the life he thought he knew. Richard realized in that chilling moment that nothing would ever be the same. His world, quiet, orderly, safe, had shattered with one phone call, and now the path forward would require courage, strategy, and the kind of determination only a parent could summon. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Tonight, everything would change. Tonight, he would face the shocking truth about his daughter. Richard sat in silence for a few moments after the call ended, the cold night pressing against the windows of his office. His hands still gripped the edges of the desk, as though anchoring himself to reality. Midnight had never felt so heavy. The lawyer's words echoed in his mind. Something's happened. It could ruin her life if not handled carefully. He couldn't yet comprehend the severity, but instinctively he knew it wasn't trivial. Emily had always been a careful, intelligent girl, attentive in school, methodical in her work, and deeply thoughtful. The thought that she could be in trouble, possibly because of a hidden decision or a mistake, struck him like a physical blow. Richard's mind flashed to the small apartment she had moved into after college. He had helped her furnish it, sent care packages, even paid for her first month's rent without protest. He had believed that setting her on her own path meant freedom, safety, and responsibility. But what if independence also meant danger? He recalled the night she had graduated. The pride in her eyes had been radiant, a reflection of years of dedication and love. She had hugged him tightly, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Dad." That promise now felt fragile, like glass, and every memory of her laughter only intensified his fear. How could a daughter so responsible suddenly find herself in a situation grave enough for a lawyer to call him at midnight? Richard forced himself to stand and pace the room. Each step echoed with uncertainty. He thought of the worst-case scenarios: legal trouble, a serious mistake, or someone trying to manipulate her. The lawyer had specifically asked him to stay, calm and not to act rashly, which was almost impossible. Calm was a luxury he couldn't afford when the well-being of his daughter hung in the balance. He tried to organize his thoughts. First, he needed to understand exactly what had happened. Second, he needed to protect Emily. And third, he needed to confront the shocking reality, whatever it was. But the unknown gnawed at him relentlessly, his imagination fueled by fear. And love conjured images of betrayal, accidents, and secrets he hadn't suspected. Richard's phone buzzed again. A text, this time from the lawyer. "Meet me at my office. Bring nothing but yourself. We need to act fast." The words were simple, yet the weight behind them was immense. Every second counted, and yet every step forward felt like wading through thick fog. As he grabbed his coat and keys, Richard's mind wandered back to Emily's childhood. He remembered reading her favorite bedtime stories until she fell asleep, cheering at her school performances, and the countless times he had stayed awake, worrying quietly while she navigated life's challenges. All of those memories, full of love and protection, now merged with a sense of helplessness. Could he have missed a warning? Could he have prevented this moment? Driving through the quiet streets, Richard's thoughts raced faster than the car. Each street lamp he passed seemed to illuminate the anxiety etched on his face. He rehearsed possible conversations with the lawyer, trying to anticipate the truth, but nothing could prepare him for the revelation awaiting him. The city was nearly asleep, yet Richard felt more awake than ever, alert to every sound, every shadow, every potential sign of danger. His mind churned with worry, love, and determination. He realized that this night wasn't just about hearing the truth. It was about action, protection, and understanding the full depth of what his daughter might be facing. When he finally arrived at the lawyer's office, the door was slightly ajar, and a dim light spilled into the empty hallway. Richard's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped inside. The quiet hum of the office contrasted sharply with the storm raging inside him. The lawyer, seated behind a polished wooden desk, gestured for him to sit. The weight in the room was palpable. "Richard," the lawyer began, his tone deliberate, "what I am about to tell you, it's serious. It concerns your daughter in ways you could not have imagined." Richard leaned forward, every muscle tense, as though bracing for impact. He realized that from this point on, nothing in his life would remain the same. In that moment, the combination of fear, love, and anticipation made him aware of one undeniable truth. This night was going to change him, his daughter, and lives forever. And whatever he was about to hear, he knew he would face it head-on, because this was Emily, his child, and he could not allow anything to harm her. Richard's hands were tightly clasped together as he sat across from his lawyer. The office felt smaller somehow, suffocating under the weight of what was about to be revealed. The lawyer cleared his throat and leaned forward, his face serious and unyielding. "Richard," he began, "I wish I didn't have to tell you this like this. But your daughter, she's involved in something far more serious than you realize." Richard's stomach dropped. He felt as though every heartbeat had stopped at once. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling despite his attempts to stay composed. The lawyer took a deep breath. "She's made a series of financial decisions that have put her and potentially you at legal risk. There's a significant sum involved, and if it isn't addressed immediately, the consequences could be devastating." Richard's mind went blank. Financial trouble? Emily? His daughter had always been responsible, careful, and meticulous. How could she have gotten herself into something so dangerous? His thoughts tumbled over themselves. Was it a scam? A friend leading her astray? Or worse, had she intentionally hidden this from him? The lawyer continued, "It's not just about the money. There are contracts, agreements, and legal obligations that she's entered into without proper guidance. If the authorities or the other parties involved find out, the situation could escalate quickly." Richard's pulse raced as he struggled to process the information. He had always trusted Emily implicitly. She was his daughter, bright, careful, ambitious. How could she, of all people, stumble into something that would jeopardize everything she had worked for? "My lawyer," he whispered. "How did this happen? How could she—" His voice trailed off, suffocated by fear and disbelief. The lawyer gave him a grave look. "Richard, she didn't do this intentionally to hurt anyone. But she made mistakes, poor decisions, and trusted the wrong people. She didn't consult anyone. And now she's caught in a situation that could spiral out of control very quickly." Richard's mind raced back through every phone call, every visit, every moment he thought he had guided her safely through life. Every memory felt like a double-edged sword now, proof of his care, yet powerless in the face of this new reality. He could see the lawyer's concern, the tension in his posture, and the urgency in his words. This wasn't a simple warning, it was a life-altering revelation. His daughter was in trouble, and the consequences could be catastrophic. How can we fix this?" Richard finally asked, his voice edged with desperation. He felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. This wasn't just about Emily, it was about protecting her future, safeguarding her from the repercussions of choices she hadn't fully understood. The lawyer's answer was firm. "We need to act quickly. There are people involved who are counting on certain outcomes, and any delay could worsen the situation. I'll guide you through the legal steps, but you need to prepare yourself emotionally. This isn't going to be easy." Richard's heart pounded as he absorbed the gravity of the news. The storm inside him, anger, fear, sadness, roared unchecked. He realized that the world he had built for his daughter, a world of care, guidance, and protection, had cracks he had never seen. And now, those cracks were threatening to swallow everything. As he left the office, his mind churned with questions. How had Emily ended up here? Was it naivety, misjudgment, or something more? He felt a sense of urgency, knowing that every moment counted. But beneath the panic was a fiercer, more determined emotion. He would do whatever it took to protect her. Driving through the quiet streets, Richard rehearsed possible solutions. He would speak to Emily, guide her, and if necessary, confront the people who had led her into this mess. But above all, he would stand by her side. She was his daughter, and no challenge, legal, financial, or personal, would make him abandon her. By the time he arrived at Emily's apartment, the first hints of dawn were breaking. The city was still quiet, but Richard's world was far from calm. He knew that what awaited him inside those walls would define not just his daughter's fate, but also the bond between them. And as he reached for the door, he whispered under his breath, "Whatever it takes, I will protect you, Emily. Protect you." Richard stood outside Emily's apartment for a moment, the morning air cold against his face. The city was quiet, but his mind was anything but. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to prepare himself for the conversation he knew he had to have. Every step toward the door felt heavy, each one carrying the weight of fear, anger, and love. He knocked firmly, then again, waiting as the door swung open. Emily appeared, her face pale, her eyes wide with surprise, and something else. Was it guilt, fear? Richard couldn't tell immediately. "Dad," she whispered, taking a small step back. Richard swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "Emily, we need to talk. Now." Inside, the apartment felt smaller than ever. Emily closed the door behind her, and the silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Richard's gaze softened for a moment, remembering the little girl who used to hide behind his legs during thunderstorms. But that softness was quickly replaced by urgency. "I spoke with your lawyer," Richard began, his tone calm but firm. "I know something serious has happened. You need to tell me the truth, Emily. Everything." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, then sat down on the edge of the couch. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. "Dad, I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I could fix it on my own, and I didn't want to worry you." Richard felt a mix of relief and rising frustration. Relief that she was alive and unharmed. Frustration that she had kept this from him. "Emily," he said gently, "you've never had to face these things alone. I am your father. I am here. Nothing is more important than your safety. Now, tell me everything." Emily took a shaky breath and began to explain. She had made some risky financial choices, trusting people who seemed trustworthy, but weren't. She had signed contracts without fully understanding the consequences, believing she could handle it herself. But the situation had escalated faster than she imagined. Debts were mounting, and there were threats of legal action. Panic had set in, and in her fear, she had hidden it from everyone, even from him. Richard listened intently, feeling a storm of emotions: fear for her, anger at the situation, and compassion for the young woman his daughter had become. He realized that her mistake wasn't malicious, it was human. It was the result of youth, naivety, and misplaced trust. But that didn't make it less serious. He reached out, taking her hands in his. "Emily, mistakes happen. Everyone makes them. But hiding them, especially from those who love you, only makes them worse. We will fix this together. I promise you that." Her tears fell freely now, and Richard felt a wave of protective resolve wash over him. He would do everything in his power to safeguard his daughter, no matter what. And for the first time that morning, he allowed himself to see a glimmer of hope amidst the fear. But even as he comforted her, a nagging worry tugged at his mind. The lawyer had emphasized urgency. There were other parties involved, contracts signed, potential consequences. He could not yet see. This wasn't just about Emily's mistakes. It was about the larger forces that had set this trap, and if they weren't careful, the fallout could affect more than just her. Richard knew the next steps had to be precise. He needed to contact the lawyer again, gather all the documents, and prepare for a confrontation with those responsible. But first, he needed to reassure Emily that she was not alone, that together they could navigate the storm. "Dad," Emily whispered again, clutching his arm. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad." "I know, Emily," he said, holding her tightly. "But it's not too late. We'll face this together, and we'll get through it. That's what family does." As they sat together, the weight of the morning's revelation hung heavily in the room. But so did a quiet determination. Richard's mind was already racing through plans, possibilities, and contingencies. This was more than a father protecting his daughter. It was about uncovering the full story, confronting those who had endangered her, and ensuring that no one could hurt her again. In that moment, he vowed silently that justice, truth, and protection would guide every decision from here on out. This was the beginning of a battle they could not afford to lose, a battle that would take them to the deepest corners of deception, risk, and ultimately revenge. Richard sat at his kitchen table, the first rays of dawn casting long shadows across the papers scattered before him. Emily had returned to her room, exhausted from the emotional confession. But Richard couldn't rest. He had to act, and fast. The lawyer's words rang in his ears. Any delay could worsen the situation. Every second now carried weight, and every decision could determine the outcome. He opened his laptop and began reviewing the documents Emily had reluctantly handed over. Contracts, agreements, emails. Everything pointed to one uncomfortable truth. Emily had been manipulated by a network of people she trusted blindly. Names appeared repeatedly, each tied to deals that were far riskier than she had realized. Richard's anger simmered beneath his concern. These were adults, some experienced in business, who had exploited her naivety, and now they had put her life and their family at risk. He paused and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about fixing a mistake. This was about justice. Every contract had to be scrutinized, every party involved identified, and every potential loophole exploited to protect Emily. He opened a notebook and began making lists: people, dates, transactions, phone calls. Each line he wrote sharpened his determination. Richard realized he couldn't do this alone. He called the lawyer, again detailing what he had found and asking for guidance on the next steps. The lawyer's tone was grave but supportive. "Richard, the key is evidence. Document everything. Keep communication clear and professional. There are parties who won't hesitate to escalate if they sense weakness." Richard nodded, though the lawyer couldn't see him. He hung up and felt the weight of responsibility settle squarely on his shoulders. Every decision, every interaction had to be calculated. The stakes were higher than he had imagined, and yet, amid the pressure, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about damage control, it was about ensuring Emily's safety and holding those responsible accountable. He remembered the small victories in Emily's life: the first school recital, the scholarship she had earned, her laughter in the park, and realized how fiercely he had to protect her future. Those memories were no longer just happy moments. They were reminders of why he had to fight. Richard then began calling people he suspected were involved, posing as a concerned father, trying to understand the truth. Some conversations were revealing, others frustratingly vague, but each one added a piece to the puzzle. Names, dates, inconsistencies, all began to form a picture of a calculated scheme that had trapped his daughter. By midday, Richard had compiled a preliminary map of the situation. He could see who had manipulated Emily, who had exploited her trust, and who might attempt to profit from her mistakes. Each revelation stoked a fire in him, a mixture of rage, determination, and protective instinct. But as the day progressed, another realization dawned on him. This was bigger than he thought. Some of the people involved were not just opportunists. They had resources, influence, and connections that could make confronting them dangerous. Richard's mind raced, balancing strategy with caution. He could not act recklessly. He had to plan meticulously. He took a moment to call Emily, explaining that he was working on the situation and that she must remain calm. Her voice trembled with relief. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "I was so scared. I didn't know who to trust." Richard's throat tightened. "I've got you, Emily. No one will hurt you, not while I'm here." As he hung up, he realized that this was only the beginning. The lawyer had warned him that any misstep could worsen the situation, and now he could see why. But Richard also understood something else. He had the advantage of clarity, focus, and the unwavering determination of a parent protecting a child. He spread the papers across the living room floor, each document a battlefield, each email a clue. He created timelines, cross-referenced communications, and identified inconsistencies. Slowly, a strategy began to emerge, a plan not just to save Emily, but to confront and hold accountable the people who had ensnared her in this dangerous situation. As night fell once again, Richard leaned back in his chair, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. But he couldn't stop. This wasn't just about legal documents, it was about trust, betrayal, and the kind of protection that only a father could provide. And somewhere in the darkness of this ordeal, he vowed silently that those responsible for putting his daughter in jeopardy would face the consequences. In that quiet, tense night, Richard made a promise. He would uncover every secret, reveal every truth, and ensure that justice, his version of revenge depth, was served. Richard knew that planning alone wasn't enough. The time had come to confront the people who had ensnared Emily. Armed with his notes, evidence, and unwavering determination, he prepared for the first meeting. Every step toward this confrontation was filled with tension. Every thought of what might happen tightened his chest. He arrived at a modest office building, the kind that seemed ordinary to the outside world, but now housed the architects of Emily's distress. Richard's hands were steady, but his mind raced with questions. Would they admit their involvement? Would they try to intimidate him, or had they anticipated his arrival? The lawyer had advised caution. Richard, remember, they thrive on fear and distraction. Keep your composure, present evidence, ask questions, and don't let them manipulate you. Richard nodded mentally, knowing the stakes were far higher than he had imagined. This wasn't just about money or contracts. It was about Emily's safety, her future, and the integrity of her life. He was led into a small, well-lit room where the key players sat, expressions calculated and indifferent. Richard took a deep breath, forcing himself to maintain a calm exterior, even as adrenaline surged through his veins. "I know what you've done," he began, his voice steady but firm, "and I am here to make sure you are held accountable." A man at the head of the table smirked. "And what exactly do you think you know?" he asked, leaning back casually. But Richard was ready. He laid out the evidence meticulously: contracts, emails, transaction histories, and the timeline of manipulation. Each document he placed on the table landed like a hammer, leaving no room for denial. The room's atmosphere shifted. Whispers among the manipulators became audible, and a sense of unease replaced their casual arrogance. Richard pressed on. "You took advantage of my daughter's trust. You misled her, encouraged her to make decisions that could have ruined her life, and you almost succeeded. That ends today." The man tried to interject, but Richard didn't pause. "I have the law on my side, and more importantly, I have the truth. You cannot intimidate me, and you cannot threaten my daughter. Every action you take from this moment forward will be documented and reported." Silence fell. The manipulators realized that the father before them was not just a concerned parent. He was a force ready to uncover every deception. Richard could feel the power of justice and determination coiling within him. This wasn't just confrontation. It was a reckoning. Suddenly, a woman in the room, one of the co-conspirators, spoke up, her voice shaky. We didn't think anyone would notice. It was just supposed to be a small advantage, a minor manipulation. We didn't think it would escalate." Richard's gaze hardened. "Minor? You put my daughter's life, her career, and her future at risk. There is nothing minor about that. You will rectify your actions, and you will cooperate fully with any legal consequences. This is your only chance to avoid further escalation." The tension in the room was palpable. Richard sensed that they were calculating their next move, weighing fear against the instinct to protect themselves. But Richard remained calm. He knew the power of truth, of evidence, and of unwavering resolve. This was a battle of minds, and he had come prepared. After hours of discussion, threats, and tense negotiations, Richard began to see cracks in their defenses. The manipulators realized that deception and intimidation would not work against a father determined to protect his child. Piece by piece, the truth emerged, names were confessed, and the scope of their manipulations became clear. Richard left the building that evening with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. He had faced the threat head-on and emerged stronger, But he also knew that this was only part of the journey. The legal consequences would unfold, the recovery would take time, and Emily's life would require careful guidance to rebuild. Driving home, he reflected on the intensity of the day. The manipulators had underestimated the depth of a parent's love, the clarity of truth, and the power of justice. Richard knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that he would fight relentlessly to ensure Emily's safety, her dignity, and her future. That night, as he finally returned home, he found Emily waiting. Her eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear, guilt, and hope. Richard smiled gently, holding her hands. "It's going to be okay, Emily. We faced them, and we're not done yet. But you are safe now, and we will see this through together." In that moment, Richard understood a profound truth. Protecting a child requires courage, strategy, and unwavering love. And sometimes, the depth of that protection becomes the story itself, a story of reckoning, resilience, and the pursuit of revenge. Richard returned home, the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders. Though the manipulators had been confronted, the battle was far from over. Legal action still needed to be precise, thorough, and unyielding. Emily watched him quietly, aware of the storm of responsibilities he had taken upon himself, yet reassured by his presence. Sitting at the dining table with the lawyer on a secure video call, Richard laid out the evidence and recounted the confrontation. The lawyer nodded approvingly. "You've done exceptionally well, Richard. The manipulators are aware that they cannot use intimidation or deceit anymore. Now we move forward, legally and strategically." Richard leaned forward, absorbing every word. "What are the next steps?" he asked. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of urgency. "First," the lawyer explained, "we file injunctions and notices to prevent any further exploitation. Next, we initiate legal proceedings for damages, misrepresentation, and fraud. We will also ensure that any parties involved are documented for potential criminal investigation. The key is timing and precision. Any misstep can undo everything." Richard nodded, mentally preparing for the meticulous work ahead. He began drafting letters, gathering signatures, and cross-referencing documents to ensure there were no loopholes. Every transaction, every email, every misstep by the manipulators became part of the legal framework they were building to protect Emily. As he worked, Richard reflected on Emily's resilience. She had been frightened and vulnerable, yet willing to face the consequences and cooperate fully. That determination, combined with his own steadfast focus, made him confident that they could turn this nightmare into a victory. But it would require patience, careful planning, and the kind of resolve only a parent protecting a child could summon. Hours turned into an intense day of preparation. Phone calls were made, documents reviewed, and strategies refined. Every detail mattered. The manipulators' own arrogance had left traces of their intent and misdeeds, and Richard ensured nothing would escape scrutiny. Finally, as the sun dipped, below the horizon, Richard leaned back in his chair, exhausted but resolute. "Emily," he said softly, entering her room, "we've prepared everything. The lawyers are ready, and we're taking the necessary steps to ensure your future is secure. You've done the right thing by being honest with me." Emily smiled, faintly, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad. I was so scared, but now I feel like I can breathe again." Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can, Emily. We're in this together, and I promise, nothing will threaten your life, your future, or your happiness again. Those who tried to exploit you will face the consequences, and justice will be served." Over the next few days, Richard and the lawyer executed the legal plan meticulously. Notices were sent, documents filed, and the manipulators began to realize the extent of the consequences they faced. Some attempted resistance, but Richard's preparation left no room for maneuvering. Every move he made was calculated, strategic, and guided by one unwavering principle: protecting Emily and holding the guilty accountable. During this period, Emily began to regain her confidence. The fear that had haunted her now slowly gave way to empowerment. She started to understand that mistakes could be rectified, especially with guidance and support from someone who truly loved her. Richard watched this transformation with pride and relief, knowing that the bond between them had deepened through the shared ordeal. By the end of the week, the manipulators were cornered. Legal pressure mounted, and they had no choice but to comply. Richard's thorough approach, patience, and unwavering determination ensured that Emily's life was no longer at risk. The ordeal had revealed the depths of deception, but it also highlighted the power of love, truth, and resilience. That evening, Richard and Emily sat together quietly. The tension of the past days had lifted slightly, though the echoes of the challenges remained. "Dad," Emily said softly, "I don't know what I would have done without you. You saved me, not just from them, but from myself too." Richard smiled, his eyes glistening. "You're my daughter, Emily. I'll always protect you, and we've learned something important. Honesty, courage, and the willingness to face the truth are more powerful than fear or manipulation. No one can take that from us." As night fell, Richard looked out the window, reflecting on the journey so far. The manipulators had been confronted, the legal actions were underway, and Emily's future was being safeguarded. But the memory of the ordeal would remain a constant reminder of the lengths a parent would go to protect a child, a story of courage, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of justice. And somewhere in the shadows of this ordeal, Richard silently vowed that the lessons learned would guide every future decision, ensuring that Emily's life and the lives of those he loved would remain protected from deceit and betrayal. The days that followed were a mixture of tense anticipation and relief. The legal wheels had begun turning, and Richard could finally witness the manipulators facing the consequences of their actions. Notices were served, deadlines approached, and their earlier arrogance turned into nervous compliance. Richard knew that the victory was as much about planning and evidence as it was about perseverance. He observed the subtle changes in their behavior. Phone calls went unanswered, emails were cautiously worded, and their earlier confident tone vanished. Richard's strategy had worked. The manipulators realized that their games could no longer succeed against someone determined and prepared. The satisfaction of seeing justice slowly unfold gave Richard a sense of calm he hadn't felt in weeks. Emily, meanwhile, began to reclaim her life. She returned to her routines, approached her work with renewed focus, and even smiled more freely. The fear and guilt that had once clouded her every decision were replaced by empowerment. Richard watched her from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. The ordeal had been harrowing, but it had strengthened her resilience and their bond. One afternoon, Richard received a call from the lawyer. "Everything is proceeding smoothly," the lawyer reported. "The manipulators are cooperating under pressure, and we have documented their admissions and commitments. Your daughter's position is secure, and the legal consequences are now firmly in their favor." Richard allowed himself a quiet sigh of relief. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The nightmare that had begun with a single urgent phone call had moved steadily toward resolution. But he also understood that vigilance was necessary. Lessons had been learned the hard way, and he would ensure Emily never faced such danger again. Returning home, Richard found Emily waiting in the living room. Her face bore a mixture of hope and lingering anxiety, but her eyes reflected trust. "Dad," she said softly, "I feel like we've finally taken control. It's not perfect, but it feels like we're safe now." Richard nodded, sitting beside her. "Yes, Emily, The danger is over, and we've learned from it. But remember, life will always have challenges. What matters is how we face them, and how we protect ourselves and each other." Emily smiled faintly, leaning against her father. "Thank you for never giving up on me. Even when I made mistakes, you stayed. I can't describe how much that means." Richard felt a lump in his throat. "That's what being a parent means," he whispered. "But it's also about teaching. Strength, resilience, and courage. And now you have all three in abundance." As the week drew to a close, the manipulators were officially held accountable. Legal settlements were finalized, agreements enforced, and the threat to Emily's future was neutralized. Richard reflected on the journey, the fear, the confrontation, the careful legal strategy, and realized that this story was more than a tale of danger and deception. It was a testament to vigilance, determination, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and child. Later that night, as the city slept quietly, Richard and Emily sat together on the balcony. The stars above seemed brighter, their calm contrasting the turmoil that had once dominated their lives. "Dad," Emily said softly, "I don't think I'll ever forget this. Not the fear, not the mistakes, and not what you did for me." Richard smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And you shouldn't forget, Emily. These experiences shape us, teach us, and remind us what truly matters. Love, trust, and courage, these are the pillars that will guide you through any storm." The ordeal had revealed truths, exposed deceit, and tested their resolve. Yet it had also strengthened their relationship, forged resilience, and illuminated the depths of human character. Richard realized that every parent would do what he had done, fight against impossible odds, protect a loved one, and ensure that justice was served. As they sat in silence, a sense of peace settled over them. The nightmare had ended, but the lessons and the bond remained. Richard knew that the story of this ordeal would stay with them forever, a story of courage, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of protection and justice. And in that moment, he smiled quietly, thinking to himself, this was the true meaning of revenge depth, not just the confrontation, but the unwavering commitment to defend and uplift those you love, no matter the darkness you must face. The days following the legal victory were quiet, yet full of reflection. Richard could finally exhale, knowing that Emily's life was no longer under threat. The manipulators had faced the consequences of their deceit, and the intricate web of lies had unraveled completely. But more than justice, Richard cherished the bond strengthened through this ordeal, the unwavering connection between a father and his daughter. Sitting together in their living room, Emily looked up at him, her eyes soft but determined. "Dad, I think I understand now," she said. "I've learned the importance of honesty, trust, and asking for help when I need it. And I've learned that mistakes, even big ones, can be overcome with the right guidance." Richard smiled, a mixture of pride and relief washing over him. "Exactly, Emily. Life will test you in ways you can't always anticipate, but it's not the mistakes themselves that define you. It's how you face them, how you learn, and how you fight to protect yourself and the people you love." Emily nodded, her gaze steady. "I know I wouldn't have survived this without you. You didn't just protect me. You taught me courage, strategy, and how to stand strong, even when the world seems against me." Richard felt a lump in his throat, the weight of emotion almost too much to bear. "And that's what family is for," he whispered. "To stand together, to fight together, and to rise from the darkness stronger than before." The house, once filled with tension and fear, now carried a quiet sense of resilience. Each day that passed, Emily regained confidence, returning to her routines, reconnecting with friends, and even laughing again, a sound that had been absent for far too long. Richard observed her growth and realized that the ordeal, painful as it was, had taught both of them something invaluable. But he also knew the lesson of vigilance. Trust must be tempered with awareness, love with prudence, and independence with guidance. He had seen how quickly a life could be derailed by deceit and manipulation. He had felt the adrenaline of confronting the manipulators, the anguish of fearing for Emily, and the triumph of seeing justice prevail. Every emotion had left its mark, but every moment had been worth it. In the quiet moments, Richard reflected on the power of parental love and protection. There is a depth to it, a force that drives one to face impossible odds, uncover hidden truths, and pursue justice relentlessly. That depth, he realized, was what defined the story of revenge depth, the courage to confront darkness, the wisdom to navigate uncertainty, and the strength to shield those you love from harm. Richard stood by the window that evening, looking out over the city lights, and whispered to himself, "This isn't just about punishment for those who sought to harm my daughter. It's about teaching, protecting, and ensuring that life, no matter how challenging, can be faced with dignity and courage." Emily joined him, placing her hand gently on his. "Dad, I think I understand why you acted the way you did. You didn't just want to save me from the consequences. You wanted to show me that I'm never truly alone, no matter the challenges I face." Richard nodded, squeezing her hand. "Exactly. And that's why, no matter what life throws at us, we will always stand together. We've faced deceit, manipulation, and fear, but we've come out stronger. That's the power of love, courage, and determination." As they stood together, a sense of closure settled in the room. The manipulators had been confronted and held accountable. Emily's life was secured, and the bond between father and daughter had grown deeper than ever before. Yet the story remained, a story of fear, challenge, courage, and ultimate victory. Richard knew that life would continue to present challenges, but he also understood that the lessons of this ordeal would guide them forever. Honesty, vigilance, and unwavering support were the pillars of protection. And above all, the strength derived from love and determination would ensure that no darkness could ever overwhelm them again. He turned to Emily, his voice steady and resolute. "Remember this, always. Life can be unpredictable, but with courage, clarity, and love, you can face anything. And whenever you feel lost, know that I will always be here." That is the promise of family and the essence of revenge depth. Emily smiled, a mixture of gratitude and relief shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Richard embraced her tightly, feeling the weight of the journey finally lift. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained. A story of resilience, truth, and the depths of parental love that no deception or challenge could ever destroy. And as the night settled around them, Richard whispered softly, "This is the story of how love, courage, and truth can conquer even the darkest schemes. This is revenge depth." And there you have it, a story of love, courage, and the lengths a parent will go to protect their child. Richard's journey shows us that even in the darkest moments, determination and truth can overcome deceit. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you chills, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps our channel bring more stories like this to life. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Depth and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that will keep your heart racing and your mind hooked. I want to hear from you. If you were in Richard's shoes, would you have confronted the manipulators the same way, or would you have taken a different approach? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. I read every comment and love seeing how you would handle these intense situations. And finally, share this story with someone who loves suspense, drama, and stories about justice, because they won't want to miss the twists, the emotion, and the ultimate triumph. Remember, in the depth of challenges, courage and love always find a way. This is Revenge Depth, signing off. Until the next story.